Welcome to Heartbreak Chronicles. Rain pounded on the windows of the Cedar Grove Police Department. Derek Mason stood in his office, focused on organizing the papers strewn across his desk. 20 years in law enforcement honed his keen intuition. At the moment, that intuition was warning him. Something was quietly changing. The rainy fall weather has been going on all week. It was as if the whole city was under a lingering haze. Derek caressed the police chief's badge pinned to his uniform. This metal badge not only symbolizes his position, but carries his dedication to justice. In this position, he has witnessed too much of humanity's good and evil. He has also handled countless cases involving betrayal and deception. However, he never imagined that one day these experiences would come in handy in his closest relationships. The clock in the office pointed to 4 in the afternoon. The overcast sky made the hour seem particularly depressing. Officer James Rodriguez knocked softly on the door and walked in. He cradled a heavy stack of papers in his hands. "Chief, the survey for the new bid project is organized. This information may be of interest to you." Derek took the file and quickly flipped through the contents. Cedar Grove's government works program has seen frequent anomalies over the past 6 months. Bid after bid, there are disturbing patterns hidden behind them. Those that were not long established won contracts with offers that far exceeded the market price. And there seems to be some sort of hidden connection between these companies. How's the investigation going with the winning company for the stadium renovation project? Derek flipped to one of the bids, and the numbers on it made him frown. The winning bid for this project was nearly 40% higher than the market estimate. And yet no one questioned it. Cedar Grove Fitness Industry Investment Corporation. James put down the coffee in his hand, a hint of uncertainty in his tone. Ostensibly, it's Michael Reeves' investment company, but the funding is quite complex. We found that there were multiple layers of shell companies working through them, making it difficult to trace the real source of funds. The name Michael Reeves has been popping up too often in Derek's life lately. As the owner of the newly opened Cedar Grove gym, he's attracted most of the city's power players as members in just 6 months. The gym has become a social center for local politicians and businessmen. And what concerns Derek even more is that his own wife, Rachel, seems to be showing unusual enthusiasm for the gym, and especially for Michael himself. What did his background check reveal? Derek continued to press the issue, all the while running through the possibilities in his mind. James hesitated, as if weighing his words. "Everything is too perfect on the surface, Chief." He appeared out of nowhere in the business world 3 years ago, and his previous experience is barely traceable. And a large portion of those winning bids were approved by Judge Patterson. This frequency is a little too coincidental. Derek's gaze lingered on the document for a moment, his inner turmoil growing stronger. He picked up his cell phone and dialed a rarely used number. On the other end of the line was his old friend Phillips from the FBI. "I need you to check someone's financial records for me, unofficial sources." He lowered his voice and said, "The more detail the better, especially the money transactions for the last 3 years." Putting the phone down, Derek walked over to the window and looked out at the rain. Pedestrians rushed by on the streets, faces blurred under umbrellas. 20 years on the force had taught him one thing. When everything seemed too perfect, it often meant that someone was behind it. It was almost 7 o'clock when I got home in the evening. The house is dark, and Rachel is once again working late. There was a note on the dining room table, at the gym, with classes. Derek scrutinizes the note paper, keenly aware of the subtle creases in the paper. The paper has obviously been rewritten. Taking advantage of his alone time, he quietly checks his home office. As an experienced police officer, he had long developed the habit of marking important documents with special marks. Sure enough, those documents about the investigation of the government program are untouched, although on the surface they appear to be tattooed. But the subtle placement reveals signs of being turned. Someone has touched these files and is deliberately trying to cover this up. "Dad." Kayla's voice came from downstairs, interrupting his thoughts. The 16-year-old daughter inherited Rachel's blue eyes, but has a personality more like his, both delicate and strong. Derek looks at his daughter and suddenly realizes she is at a sensitive age. Any family change could have a huge impact on her. "Mom said she was talking to Coach Michael about my training program." Kayla said as she rummaged through the refrigerator, her eyes sparkling with excitement. He thought I was athletic enough to pursue an athletic scholarship. Dad, what do you think? Derek gazed at the side of his daughter's face as a wave of mixed emotions surged through him. Rachel never discussed with him the plan to get Kayla professionally trained. This feeling of being deliberately avoided reminded him of the documents that had been tampered with. Over the course of his career, such details have often been signs of larger problems. It was nearly 9 o'clock when Rachel finally returned. She was wearing a new, valuable workout outfit, and her face was flushed with post-workout blush. But Derek was keenly aware of the way her eyes flickered, as if she was trying desperately to hide something. Lately, her closet has been filled with more designer sportswear, priced well above the salary level of an average teacher. Michael says Kayla is really talented, Rachel said with undisguised excitement in her tone as she organized her gym bag. He said he'd be willing to give her special instruction and said he'd like to talk to you at length about the training program this weekend. Yes? Derek's tone was awfully calm. I was just about to have a nice chat with this coach Michael, too. He noticed the slight change in Rachel's expression when she mentioned Michael. It was a look he'd seen so often in interrogation rooms, expectant and nervous at the same time. After sending Kayla upstairs to rest, Derek sat alone in his study. Spread out in front of them were bid documents for the city's construction projects. The light from the desk lamp cast shadows on the paper as he carefully compared the data. A disturbing pattern is emerging. These winning companies, though with different names. But the money flows all point vaguely to Michael's investment firm, and Judge Patterson's signature can be seen on every record of approval. The pattern is too obvious, yet leaves circumscribed legal gaps everywhere. Late at night, while Rachel sleeps, Derek gets up again to check the file. He made almost imperceptible marks in specific places on each document. The angle of the folded corners, the position of the staples, the way the paper was folded, all these tiny traces were the alarms he laid. And one by one, these alarms are being triggered. The phone vibrated with a message from James. Chief, there are new findings in the financial investigation. Michael's company has had a recent influx of cash from an unknown source. Do we need to keep digging deeper? Derek stood in front of the window, looking at the neon sign of the gym in the distance, brightly lit in the rain. 20 years on the force had taught him one important lesson. Betrayal never comes with much fanfare. It always creeps in the details and grows slowly in the most intimate relationships. And now, his every professional instinct was reminding him. A storm big enough to destroy everything he holds dear is brewing. His family, on the other hand, is right at the center of this storm. The early morning sun was just filtering through the curtains when Derek's cell phone rang sharply. It was Phillips on the line, and the FBI agent's voice had an unusual gravity to it. You'd better take a look at this immediately, he said. I've found something disturbing. It's not just about funding. There's a much bigger network involved than we thought. Derek immediately turned on his computer, and a few minutes later, an encrypted file appeared on his screen. As the documents unfolded page by page, a large and complex network of political and business collusion gradually emerged. Michael Reeves' gym is ostensibly an upscale fitness club. In reality, it is an elaborate place of socializing. Those personal training courses, which can cost thousands of dollars, are nothing more than the perfect cover for politicians and entrepreneurs to trade favors. Here's a list of VIP members, Phillips said on the other end of the line. You'd better sit down and read it. Behind each name is a detailed record of money transactions. Derek's eyes scanned the screen line by line, his frown tightening with each name he saw. Supervisor Robert Thompson of the City Engineering Department, Sarah Miller of the City Planning Commission, and 3 key council members. Even Judge Patterson. The names of these men form a chilling overlap with those of dubious government programs. What's most interesting is the gym surveillance system, Phillips continues, where they've installed hidden recording devices in certain so-called personal training rooms. These recordings are clearly not being used to improve service, they are their insurance. We found a couple of very interesting conversations about budget adjustments for several large infrastructure projects. Just as Derek was about to ask for details, the office door was suddenly pushed open. James walked in quickly, his face stony in an unusual way. Chief, you have to see this. He puts down a stack of photos, all from security cameras around the gym. The photo shows Michael in a secret meeting with several familiar faces. This includes key people responsible for approving government projects. Our investigation has revealed, James lowered his voice as if worried about ears through the walls, that the basement of the gym holds regular, special meetings every week. The participants are clear-cut city power brokers, and at the end of each meeting, a staggering amount of money is transferred to Michael's account in the Cayman Islands. Amounts range from $50,000 to $200,000, depending entirely on the size of the budget for that week's government program. Derek scrutinized the photos, and one in particular caught his attention. The photo was taken last Tuesday night, the exact time Rachel claimed to have attended a special class. His wife is shown having what appears to be a relaxed conversation with judges Michael and Patterson. But the way the trio stood and looked showed this was no ordinary fitness consultation. We also found this. James handed over a document. The gym recently applied for a remodeling project with a budget of $5 million. Oddly enough, the engineering firm's registered address is a vacant P.O. box, but the project was still approved by Judge Patterson within 3 days. Derek was about to respond when the cell phone in his pocket suddenly vibrated violently. Caller ID says it's Kayla. A sense of foreboding welled up. "Dad." My daughter's voice was tinged with obvious fear and trembling. "There are strangers in the house. I'm hiding in a storage room on the second floor, and there are several people talking downstairs." Derek's heart instantly clenched, and his adrenaline quickly spiked. "Stay calm and keep quiet. Tell me what you saw. Can you recognize who it is?" "I wasn't feeling too well today and came home early," Kayla whispered, a sob in her voice, "and just went upstairs when I heard someone come in. It's Mom and Michael and a couple of people I don't recognize. They were going through your office, and I heard them say they were looking for some kind of file." "Good, Kayla. You did the right thing. Stay where you are and don't make any noise. I'll be home soon." Derek sprang into action while signaling James to call for backup. A million images flashed through his mind on the way to his home. The carefully rummaged through files, Rachel's recent erratic behavior, Michael's carefully woven web of relationships. All the clues were suddenly pointing in a terrible direction. 15 minutes later, 4 police cars silently surrounded Derek's residence. Through the living room window, he could clearly see several figures walking around inside. The SWAT team was in position, and James led them to guard the front and back exits of the house. Everyone was waiting for his signal. Derek took a deep breath and opened the front door noiselessly with his key. The scene that came into view made his blood instantly freeze. Rachel, Michael, and his business partner Jessica Walsh were sitting around the dinner table. Spread out in front of him were his investigation papers. There was also a laptop on the table, with some sort of document editing interface displayed on the screen. "What are you doing?" Derek's voice was as cold as a sheathed knife. Everyone froze in place at the sudden sound. Rachel's face instantly turned white while Michael tried to stay calm. But the panic in his eyes betrayed him. "Derek, it's not what you think." "Shut up," Derek interrupted sternly while gesturing. The SWAT team immediately poured into the room. "Hands on your head, all crouched down." "James, read them the Miranda warnings." "Derek, please let me explain." Rachel's voice was laced with sobs, tears already streaming down her face. "We're just tampering with police documents?" Derek's eyes swept across the desktop and saw several documents that were obviously forgeries. The documents were carefully altered to look like proof that he had deliberately concealed evidence and harbored certain suspects. "Trying to plant evidence on me? Put me on the hook for falsifying evidence?" "It was all Michael's idea," Rachel snapped, getting an angry look from Michael in return. "He said if he could get you off the case." "Enough." Derek interrupted her and turned to James. "Conduct a thorough search of the entire house and gather all evidence. Tell forensics I want a complete fingerprint and DNA match. Pay special attention to electronic devices and send all computers and cell phones for data recovery." As the officers began to move, Derek walked quickly upstairs. He found a still shivering Kayla in the storage room and held his daughter close in his arms. "It's okay. It's over. You're safe." "I'm sorry, Dad." Kayla sobbed against his shoulder. "I should have told you before." Last week I saw Mom snooping around your files, but I couldn't believe it. You did the right thing, Derek said as he gently stroked his daughter's back, trying to calm her fears, choosing to call me at the most critical moment. You showed great bravery. Michael's growl suddenly came from downstairs. You idiots. You don't even understand what's involved. The whole city is caught up in this. Judge Patterson, the council members, everyone is part of this plan. You guys think it's over if you arrest me? That's just as well. Derek's voice was cold as ice. Let's get all these everyone's out. James, notify the FBI that it's time for a full-scale operation. During a subsequent search, police found a large number of documents on Michael's laptop, a detailed account of how this network of political and business collusion works. The gym is just scratching the surface. Behind it is an elaborate system of profit transfer. Contractors on government projects launder money through gyms. It is then up to Judge Patterson and others to make sure that these projects are successfully approved. Every transaction is carefully recorded, and each participant plays a specific role in this vast network. You think you can stop my investigation this way? Derek looked down at the handcuffed Michael with uncontrollable anger in his voice. You're so naive, Derek, Michael snapped with a wry smile. You think this is the end? You have no idea how many others are involved. Every corner of this city has been infiltrated. Do you really think you can fight the whole system? Take it away. Derek interrupts him and turns toward the window. The torrential rain had stopped, but he knew that the real storm was just beginning. All those betrayed trusts, all those betrayed justices will be liquidated in the days to come. Late that night, Derek sits alone in his office with the evidence seized from his home in front of him. There was only one desk lamp on in the office, and the dim light added a bit of gravity to the scene. James knocked softly on the door and came in with new news. Chief, Judge Patterson just booked a flight to the Cayman Islands tomorrow through his assistant. Looks like someone's already panicking. Let him book it, Derek said calmly, a cold glint in his eyes. It's time to show everyone in whose hands the law of this city really lies. His eyes fell on the pile of evidence on the table, knowing that this was only the beginning. The real battle is just kicking off. Judge Patterson's getaway plan is exactly what Derek expected. FBI agents were already waiting on the runway when the judge's private jet was ready to take off. The once untouchable judge is now being escorted back to the police station like a lost dog. However, this is only the beginning. As the investigation deepens, an even more shocking truth emerges. Take a look at this, James said, looking unusually grave as he placed a stack of documents in front of Derek. We found out that Judge Patterson didn't just approve those illegal government contracts. He has also actively interfered in the direction of investigations in at least a dozen major cases. Behind every case, Michael can be found. Derek looked over the file carefully, his brow furrowing the more he frowned. For the past 3 years, however, any case involving Michael and his network of connections has been skillfully directed by Patterson to a dead end. Some cases were forcibly terminated from investigation, others were led in unrelated directions. The maneuver was so skillful that it obviously wasn't the first time it had been done. He's protecting the whole network, Derek said coldly, and not just for the money. There's a bigger secret here. Just then, Philip's call came in. You've got to see this. The FBI agent's tone was as serious as ever. We found a series of tapes in Patterson's personal safe. The content is pretty amazing. This is more than a simple case of corruption, Derek. We have uncovered a systematic criminal network that has infiltrated all levels of the law enforcement system. What was found? Derek pursued. The recordings mention at least 3 state judges, 2 senior prosecutors, and the heads of several key departments. They were holding regular secret meetings to coordinate how to control the direction of important cases. Patterson seems to be an important node in this network. Derek stood at the window, looking out at the city lights. Cedar Grove looks calm and peaceful in the night, but he knows it's only on the surface. As the investigation progresses, more people will be disturbed. Those who once stood tall are now facing the fear of being exposed. However, the forces of darkness did not sit idly by. The next evening, as Derek walks towards the police station parking lot, the unexpected strikes. Three lanky men suddenly appeared from the shadows of the concrete pillars and surrounded him. By the dim lighting, he recognized one of them as Tommy Kelly, the fight instructor at Michael's gym. This former professional fighter has made a name for himself in the underground fighting scene. "You should have known better than to call it quits, Chief Mason," Tommy sneered, a steel pipe in his hand. The metal glows cold in the light. "This is the final warning. There are some things that are out of your hands." But they clearly underestimated the fighting ability of a seasoned police chief. 20 years of frontline police work has allowed Derek to experience countless life and death moments. His body was in fighting shape in an instant, years of training making every reaction instinctive. By the time the first assailant swung the pole, Derek had already anticipated the trajectory of the attack. He nimbly sidestepped and dodged while striking his opponent's throat with a precise hand slash. The man immediately fell to the ground, letting out a groan of pain. Before the second man could react, he was thrown hard to the ground with a beautiful over-the-shoulder drop. The head hit the concrete floor with a dull thud. Tommy is clearly a much tougher opponent as a professional fight coach. His punches and kicks were fast and furious, nearly hitting Derek in the gut several times. But Derek's real-world experience prevails, and he knows the difference between street fighting and competitive fighting. There are no rules, no limits, just survival. In the heat of the fight, Derek suffered a broken corner of his mouth and a heavy kick to the ribs. The intense pain slowed his movement slightly, but he stayed calm and waited for the perfect moment. Finally, Derek seizes the opportunity the moment Tommy loses his balance with a sweeping leg kick. A standard takedown subdues his opponent, with a heavy knee to Tommy's spine. Just then, James arrived with reinforcements. "I knew something was going to happen," he said as he sharply cuffed his fallen assailant. "So I've been following you in the shadows." "Good job." Derek wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, still breathing hard. "Now we have a new breakthrough." In the interrogation room, facing Derek's calm gaze, Tommy quickly breaks down. Perhaps because of the shame of being subdued, or perhaps because of the fear within him, he began to give an account of everything. "Michael ordered it," he said shakily, beads of sweat rolling down his forehead. "But the orders came from higher up. They said you had to be stopped from continuing the investigation at all costs. They say you've threatened the whole system." "Who's they?" Derek pursued, his eyes sharp as knives. "I don't know exactly who it is." Tommy's voice was filled with fear. "But I heard Michael mention that someone was at the state level. They control the whole system, from the courts to the prosecutor's office, from the police department to the government departments. It's a huge network, Derek, and you're messing with the wrong people." Instead of scaring Derek off, the attack strengthens his resolve to continue the investigation. By analyzing Tommy's confession and cell phone communication records, he follows the trail and discovers a far larger network of corruption than he ever imagined. This network not only involves local governments, but even extends to the state level. "It's worse than we thought," Derek told James, a hint of exhaustion in his voice. "The system has been infiltrated too deeply. Even if we catch Patterson and Michael, there will be people who will continue to keep the system running." After a night of deep thought, Derek made an important decision. Early the next morning, he submitted his resignation to the police commission. The decision shocked the entire police department. "Are you sure you want to do this?" James asked incredulously. "Are you going to just give up?" "No," Derek replied calmly, a cold glint in his eye. "There are some things that can't be done within the system. But if we're outside the system, the rules are completely different." Word quickly spread throughout the police department. Some lamented, some breathed a sigh of relief. But everyone knew that Derek Mason was not a man who would easily admit defeat. His departure means some sort of bigger storm is coming. A week later, Derek rented an office on the other side of town. A sign hangs discreetly on the door, "Mason Investigative Consulting." James didn't hesitate to join him as his most trusted partner. "You know," Derek said to James, "sometimes, in order to uphold justice, one must first learn to walk in the dark. From now on, we don't have to be bound by rules anymore." Just then, a text from Phillips arrived. "The state's attorney's office has taken a strange approach to the Patterson case, and they seem to be deliberately delaying the prosecution process. Someone is putting pressure behind the scenes. Derek smiled slightly. Looks like it's time to show them that I can still be a nightmare for them even after I leave the force. He opened his computer and pulled up all the evidence he had collected earlier. In an encrypted folder was stored all the information he had secretly collected over the years. Secret meetings of politicians, dubious rulings by judges, and illegal transactions by businessmen. This evidence will be the weapon he uses to wage war outside the system. Ready, James? Derek asked. The real battle is just beginning. James nodded firmly. We may not be cops anymore, but we're still upholding justice. Just the way. We'll be different. Derek looks out the window. As night falls, the neon lights of the city begin to flicker. Beneath these shiny surfaces lie countless dirty deals and betrayals. But now, at last, he could pursue it to the end without any restrictions. Bring to justice those who think they can get away with it. His cell phone rang again. It was a text from an unfamiliar number. I hear you're going against the whole system? You'll regret it. Derek sneered and replied, No, it's you who regret it. In the evening, as he walked alone towards the parking lot of his new office, he could feel multiple prying eyes in the shadows. But this time, he's no longer the police chief who needs to follow the rules. Now he could use any means necessary to deal with these people. Let the games begin, he whispered, at the same time touching his sidearm, which rested in a holster under his armpit. The gun no longer represents police authority, but the determination of an avenger. In a sense, he is no longer the police chief who upholds the law. Instead, he becomes a hunter who seeks justice in the shadows. And the corrupt in this city are about to learn what it costs to offend someone who is no longer bound by the rules. For the next month, Cedar Grove was outwardly calm, but dark. Derek's investigative consulting firm begins to weave a vast web in the darkness, waiting for its prey to throw itself into the net. He knew that those who were ostensibly free of suspicion would try to move their illegal assets. Look at this, James pointed to the computer screen. There have been several suspicious flows of money to the Cayman Islands in the last 2 weeks. The senders were all shell companies, but the funds all ended up in the same account. Derek sneered. They're starting to panic. Phillips, can you trace the owner of this account? It's already being looked into, the FBI agent replied. But these people are being cautious and using multiple layers of agents. But, he paused, we found an encrypted file in Michael's laptop that appears to contain an emergency evacuation plan. This is the opportunity Derek was waiting for. He began spreading the word in select circles that someone had a secret overseas escape route to avoid law enforcement. The news spread like ripples and soon reached the ears of the anxious and powerful. At the same time, Derek puts out carefully crafted disinformation in the media. Insiders in the state's attorney's office have revealed that a new round of mass arrests is imminent. The story caused an uproar in the local media. Are you sure this is going to work? James was a little worried. What if they recognize it? The higher up you are in the hierarchy, the more afraid you are of losing everything, Derek said calmly. Fear makes them lose their judgment. Just watch, they're bound to bite. Sure enough, within 3 days, Michael's lawyer secretly contacted one of Derek's informants, trying to pry into the details of that escape route. At the same time, Judge Patterson's associates were covertly contacting several underground agents about smuggling. Derek starts setting up the traps. He gets his informant to reveal that there is an abandoned private airfield on the outskirts of town with pilots willing to provide secret transportation. To add credibility, he also arranged for a couple of stand-ins to perform camouflage takeoffs and landings at the airport. Our friends have taken the bait, James reported. Michael and Patterson are both poking around this airport. They seem to have bought into the story. Just then, news arrives from the guardhouse that Rachel has had an emotional breakdown and attempted suicide. Derek rushes to the hospital and sees his ex-wife handcuffed to a hospital bed with thick bandages around her wrists. It's all Michael, Rachel said weakly, tears sliding down her cheeks. He used me and now he's trying to pin all the blame on me. Derek stood silently in front of the hospital bed. At one point, he thought he'd lost all feelings for Rachel long ago. But at this moment, looking at her pale face, a wave still rippled inside. However, The ripple was soon replaced by a stronger will. "You know more inside, don't you?" he asked calmly. Rachel closed her eyes, tears still flowing. "Michael and Patterson, they're plotting a bigger project. The state is going to invest in a new business district with $1 billion budget. They've set it up to win the bid through a series of shell companies." This information just confirms Derek's suspicions. He told James to notify the FBI immediately and step up the airport's deployment. At the same time, he began spreading the word in various social settings that the FBI investigation was nearing its end. An investigation will soon be launched into this business district project. The news came like a bombshell and caused a huge panic in Cedar Grove's powerful circles. Those involved are starting to become fidgety. Finally, one rainy night, Derek waited for the results he wanted. "Targets are showing up," James reported over the intercom. "Michael and Patterson are driving separately to the airport. They seem to be in a hurry and seem to be carrying a lot of stuff." Derek stood in the airport control tower, watching the ground movements through his night vision equipment. As the two limousines approached the runway, he pressed the signaler in his hand. In an instant, bright lights illuminated the entire runway as FBI SWAT teams encircled from all sides. "FBI, freeze!" The shouts echoed in the night sky. Michael and Patterson were caught red-handed. What's more, in their car, the SWAT team found a large number of documents and electronic devices. The evidence details their criminal network: illegal contracts, records of bribes, evidence of collusion between politics and business. The list goes on. "You set us up." A handcuffed Patterson growls at Derek. "No." Derek stepped closer, his voice icy. "It's your greed that has engineered yourselves. I'm just making justice come faster." During the trial, Michael quickly broke down in the face of hard evidence. He began to give an account of everything, trying to seek leniency for himself by turning in others. His confession shocked investigators. The corruption network was even larger than imagined, involving top officials from several government departments. However, the most important thing for Derek is to bring Michael and Patterson to justice himself. He felt a cold satisfaction as he watched these two once invincible men cringe in the face of the evidence. "You know," he said to James, "sometimes justice requires a little patience and wisdom." The fallout from the case spread quickly. As more evidence is revealed, the power structure throughout Cedar Grove begins to shake. One by one, those once high and mighty have fallen from grace. And Rachel's mental state deteriorates further when she learns of Michael's betrayal in prison and has to undergo psychiatric treatment. "Is Mom okay?" Kayla asked one night. Now she was no longer the little girl who was easily frightened. Through systematic training, she became stronger. "She needs time," Derek replied, "just like all of us." "But remember, Kayla, the most important thing in life isn't revenge, it's getting justice done." Kayla nodded, a determined gleam in her eye. "That's why I decided to learn self-defense. I'm never going to be someone's victim again." Looking at his daughter's strong back, Derek knew that the storm had brought them hurt though, but it also makes them tougher. And those who try to escape the net of justice will eventually pay for what they have done. A new era is beginning under the night sky in Cedar Grove. Those evils that were once hidden in the darkness are being revealed little by little. And Derek, the man of justice no longer confined to the system, will continue to watch over the city's light from the shadows. 10 years later, Derek stood in the top-floor office of his investigative firm overlooking the Cedar Grove skyline. The city has changed dramatically over the years. Not only are the skyscrapers on the surface, but more importantly, the corrupt forces hiding in the shadows have been uprooted. Michael is in his 8th year in prison, with 12 more years of his sentence waiting for him. The spirited gym owner of the day is now desiccated by a long prison sentence. He applied several times for a reduction of his sentence, but his applications were rejected. After all, those he betrayed made sure he wouldn't regain his freedom easily. Judge Patterson's downfall was even more dismal. He was given special care by the other inmates in the prison. Those who had been unjustly sentenced by him were finally waiting for their chance for revenge. Even in a maximum security prison, the former judge still lives in daily fear. "Derek," James said as he walked into the office, a file in his hand, "there's another case." A Chicago entrepreneur who suspects collusion between his partners and local government officials wants us to investigate. Mason Survey and Consulting has grown to become one of the most prestigious organizations in the industry during this decade. They specialize in cases that involve collusion between politics and business, helping victims to uncover the truth and bring about justice. The company's reputation even extends internationally, with many multinational companies coming to the company. "Leave it to Linda," Derek said. "I'm more concerned about Sarah's case." Sarah Jenkins is a district attorney who recently found her investigation heavily obstructed. It is suspected that there is pressure from someone at the top. It's a situation that reminds Derek of himself 10 years ago. By the way, James added, Rachel wrote again. This is her 8th year in prison, and she's a few months away from being released. Derek looked out the window and didn't say anything. Over the years, Rachel wrote letters every month, but he never replied. It's not because of hatred, but there are some wounds that time can't fully heal. It was at that moment that the office door was pushed open. A young woman in an FBI uniform walked in. "Dad," Kayla said with excitement in her voice, "we just closed a big case. That government procurement corruption case involving 3 states has finally been solved." Derek turned to look at his daughter, a surge of pride welling up inside him. The little girl who was shivering in the storage room has grown up to be a good federal investigator. She specializes in investigating cases of political corruption, carrying on her father's will in her own way. "Tell me the details," Derek gestured for his daughter to sit down. Listening to Kayla describe the case, he saw a reflection of himself back then. The same focus, the same sense of justice, but with more wisdom than when he was much younger. "You know," Kayla said, "every time I get a tough case, I think about that night 10 years ago. That experience taught me that justice may be late, but it is never absent." That's when James' phone rang. It was their informant in the state's attorney's office. The Supreme Court rejected Michael's appeal, and he must serve his entire sentence. "He deserved it," Kayla said coldly. Over the years, she has never been able to forgive Michael for the damage he did to her family. "No," Derek shook his head. "The difference between us and them is that we're always on the side of the law. Even in the pursuit of justice, keep the light within." As night falls, Derek is the only one left in the office. He opened his computer and pulled up an encrypted folder. Inside are all the cases they've handled in the last 10 years. Corruption by politicians, malfeasance by judges, fraud by businessmen. Behind every case, there are countless victims like him back then. "Boss," Linda knocked on the door. "There's a new development in that Chicago case. We found some interesting connections that may involve several members of Congress." Derek nodded. "Get ready to move. Remember, be as patient as a hunter, waiting for the right moment to strike a blow." As we were talking, Kayla came back as well. "Dad, my request for a transfer to the Philadelphia branch has been approved, so that I can come back to see you more often." Looking at his daughter's determined eyes, Derek remembered Sarah's words. "The world needs more people like you, those who are willing to look for the truth in the darkness." The next morning, Derek came to the office as usual. The secretary told him that 3 new clients were waiting. These people come from different cities and have different identities, but they have all suffered the same injustice. "James," Derek called to his old partner, "ready to start a new fight?" "Always ready," James laughed. "How many people have we helped over the years?" "Not enough," Derek replied. "As long as there are still people abusing their power, our work won't end." Late afternoon, Kayla calls to say she's working on a new case and needs his advice. Listening to his daughter's expert analysis, Derek felt a sense of inherited power. Instead of breaking them, the hurt they once felt has allowed this father and daughter to find their respective missions. At night, Derek stands alone in front of his office window. That storm 10 years ago changed the fate of too many people. Michael and Patterson spend the rest of their lives in prison, and Rachel is about to regain her freedom. He and Kayla, on the other hand, chose to continue fighting in the darkness. Was it all worth it? James asked this question once. The answer lies in the justice that is served, in the eyes of the victims who have regained their fairness, and in Kayla's determined eyes. Justice may come at a price, but that price is worth paying. Late at night, Derek receives an anonymous text message. "Heard you guys are investigating Congressman Carter's case?" I'd advise you to stop in moderation." He sneered and threw his cell phone on the table. 10 years later, some people still don't understand how stupid it is to try to threaten someone who has lost everything. "Let the game continue," he murmured, his gaze determined. Under the night sky of Cedar Grove, there is destined to be more darkness waiting to be revealed. They, on the other hand, will continue to be that hunter in the darkness until every evil hiding in the shadows has no place to hide. That's the end of today's story. For more captivating tales, hit subscribe and never miss an episode.